I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
We are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. We have received request upon request upon request upon request.
Upon request, even.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
For Boards of Canada's fourth album, Tomorrow's Harvest. So without further ado, we decided you guys, push it up on our list so much that we needed to review it. And here it is. So this album came out actually a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. It's obviously gotten a lot of critical acclaim. Boards of Canada being, they're actually, contrary to popular belief, they are Scottish, not Canadian, but Scottish. They're an electronic music duo, and actually I think I would use electronic loosely because what they really do is like down-tempo, ambient, electronic, music that it's more like soundtrack music.
Yeah, it really is.
Than it is anything else. Like you feel like you're
very
watching
moody.
Something.
And
it's by design. These guys are I feel very, very good at what they do. They're true artists, and they've been around for a long time. I'm not quite sure when their last album came out.
It was like 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So it was heralded as a return album, along with several other return albums this year. So it's exciting to see these guys come back. Now, Tomorrow's Harvest is you just got to dive into what this sounds like. First of all, it is entirely an ambient album.
Yeah.
There's a lot of electronic elements, a lot of synths here, but it never feels anything less than organic, I would say. It has, for being an electronic-based album, it sounds like it's just like a normal organic sound to it. I don't know how else to describe that. Now, I would say that the overall mood to this album is extremely chilly and cold.
Yeah.
Tom, what was your take on the sound of Tomorrow's Harvest?
Well, I agreed with all that. And a lot of what it comes down to, you have to look at the arrangements and you have to look at the actual sounds that they're using. That's really what it comes together. And you can tell they were looking for one cohesive album experience. And I say experience rather than listen because they said that they really wanted there to be some implied visual elements when you're listening to this. And that right there tells you that they're going for a unified theme and a unified approach to this album. But a lot of the arrangement is somewhat minimalistic, but when you listen enough, you find a lot of the subtleties in there that really seep out of the mix, and that's what really makes it interesting. But kind of moving from there to some of the sounds they're using, you mentioned that things sound very organic on here, and I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because they're using sounds that sound closer to like the 70s and 80s, back when like Kraftwerk was making stuff. While Kraftwerk took it a little more dancey, a little more techno rather than just the ambient, some of those sounds are in here. And it reminded me of like mid-90s PBS. When you're watching PBS and right before the guy comes on and says, made possible by viewers like you get those kind of sounds and things and some of those like cheap shows. And it's funny because at first I didn't really like that aspect of it. Now, I mean, that's something that's kind of always been present in their music. I've listened to Gio Gotti and Music Has the Right to Children, for example, several times. They're both very good albums. But I get into it a little bit more for the composition and arrangement aspects of it. So it always takes me a while to get to that point because the first thing you hear is the sound, and you have to get past that and think about the sound palette they're using.
And how they created the album.
Yeah, but everything, because of that, was very deliberate. So I guess the word I would like to use is analog. Because you can tell, you said very organic. I'm talking about older sounds. What does that have in common?
It's analog.
It has analog recording techniques because these sounds were present back in the 70s and 80s.
It's all by design.
Yeah, before digital was really a huge part of the recording process.
Yeah, so. I completely agree. In fact, you say 90s, but I think that's just because, we grew up as, we were little kids in the 90s. That's when we watched PBS. But to be honest with you, it's like what they were going for is sounds from, like, whether it's film or documentaries or PBS. From like the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s and stuff. Like to me, when I'm listening to this, I've watched Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and this is just that. It could be a soundtrack to one of those episodes, I just see like a camera just panning over like a cold world. And to get into kind of the theme and context of the album, and doing some research on this album, there's some great stuff on Wikipedia about Tomorrow's Harvest, specifically what Boards of Canada designed the album to be. Whenever, and Tom, you and I have talked before, especially with like post-rock albums, but any album or musical experience where you're not presented with a vocalist, to someone or an agent to tell you a story, more emphasis is placed on album artwork, mood, atmosphere, and track titles.
Absolutely.
And really, album artwork and track titles, you don't think of those as being like main contributors to the overall listening experience. Well, because they're not audio components.
Yeah.
But really, they can influence your listening experience.
And they should.
And I think Tomorrow's Harvest is the perfect example, and here's why. So if you look at the cover, so if you're watching this on our website, www.velocitiesmusic.com, you can actually see we post the album artwork, and on the album artwork you see like this picture of a city skyline. Well, that skyline is San Francisco, and there's a lot of details. Like, these guys thought about this. It's a very artistic standpoint of how they approach designing the album artwork, but the high level overview is like the city is transparent, and the reason is that it actually borrows the name. I forget what media it was from, but they borrowed the name, and the whole theme is about climate change, and really in looking at a transparent city with the thought of climate change, and like the title Tomorrow's Harvest, like it has some implications about things that we're doing today and makes an artistic statement. And if you correlate the track titles to that, it all seems to make sense. The experience that we had listening to this album was by design, and what was crazy is that we had these like realizations and like understanding what they went for, and then we went and read all that, and then it confirmed everything that we were thinking, and it's like, wow, these guys are true visionaries. They're artists. They know how to construct an audio listening experience, and how to create a piece of audio art, in my mind. And the more I dug into that, like that was the tipping point for me, because then I noticed all the little nuances about the song and how they relate, and the things that they would do, like how some of the tracks, as you pointed out earlier, will just cut off a lot of the subtle nuances in each track. There's a lot of hidden melody lines in here where you have really quiet and even sometimes multiple synth melodies going on at once, and it kind of just gives this soft, airy texture, but still provides enough of a tune that you're actually listening to music. So it's just kind of an overall very artistic experience that I find enjoyable. Now, I get into ambient music. Tim Hecker's Rave Death 1972 is, honestly, it's becoming one of my favorite albums. I can't stop listening to that, and I had similar experiences with this. I honestly didn't like Tomorrow's Harvest that much at first, for a lot of the reasons you said earlier. Yeah. But the more I got into it, the more I found like this is so detailed, so well written, so well planned, and so albumized that it's like, how do I not just love this and keep listening to it? And I kept coming back to it for that reason. Now, Tom, if I were to complain about any one thing, it's that this album is, first of all, it's 62 minutes long. It's a little bit too long without making a point. Like, I mean, it makes a really good point stating the concept, but I feel like it could have been more concise. It could have been
and
more
still
impactful.
had the same effect.
Exactly. It could have been more impactful if it would have been handled just a little bit differently. It's a minor gripe because I really ended up liking this album. Tom, what were you thinking you're going to give it?
I'm going to give it a 78. I actually came up on it quite a bit. This isn't exactly my cup of tea, but I really came to appreciate a lot of the way they were composing this as an album and approaching that. So, yeah, I don't think I'll ever love it, but I really like it, really respect it.
Cool. I'm going to go 83. I mean, I just really got into the cerebral, intellectual feel. I love the cold, icy mood, and honestly, it was just fun to dig into this album and to learn all of its nuances. So, it's definitely one I'm going to come back to. What did you guys think about Tomorrow's Harvest? There's a lot of you guys, as we said earlier, that have requested this album. Clearly, you've listened to it. We're really interested to hear your thoughts. Please leave us a comment at www.velocitiesmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums from 2013 you'd like to see us review, or really from all forever, from the dawn of time. Although, typically 2013 we have to hit a lot of those albums.
We're not going to review any Gregorian chants.
Yeah, I would prefer not to review a Gregorian chant.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.